you provide some facts in there. The one that I had never really been aware of was like the measure of how much of U.S. wealth is inherited across the board. But in terms of like the idea, the premise of this myth is that if you work hard and you play by the rules, which I think was like a famous like Clinton formulation, you're going to get ahead. Talk about sort of like the actual numbers a little bit as to where people actually make their money in reality in this country. Or I should make their money, get their money.
Yeah, get their money. So something like it was the Fortune 500 list, and I think it was done like 10 years ago, to be fair. But the nonprofit economic think tank looked at the numbers and discovered that 60% of the people on the list had been born, if not wealthy, then well off. So this idea that everyone's born on that list is majority are born on third base and some are born on second base, to use that overused metaphor. So that's just one of the many incredible stats I found that were like really about the lack of wealth, equal wealth distribution in this country, how much inheritance has to play in this, how much inherited property has to play in this, which is part of why we have such white wealth in this country, because of a history of redlining around home ownership, around people of color. And just it's kind of mind-boggling. And the thing that the tag I give that whole lie that, oh, we deserve this, we deserve this 60% of us who with inherited wealth being in the Fortune 500 list, is rich fictions, and they're stories that I think some of the wealthier people in America like to tell, and some of the less wealthy people in America believe that those who have these resources and have had them for generations somehow are better and they deserve them. And it's kind of the deserving rich. And I think that's one of the symptoms or the products of this, self-made man story. It's just pulled the wool over the eyes of generations.
Let's talk about that, sort of the isolation that is created and the sort of the self-blame and the sort of the self-help sort of industry that is also feeds into this myth. I mean, I remember interviewing, and I cannot remember who it was that wrote the No Man's Land, but it was about people who had lost their homes in the wake of the financial crisis. And maybe we did a couple of authors who had written, having done ethnographies of a lot of these people.
Evicted?
Maybe it was Evicted, and Matthew, is that?
Matthew does it, yeah.
Yes, and the, like, almost to a person, everyone they interviewed felt that they had made bad choices that had led to their financial ruin, and did not connect the dots that there was like a million other people who lost their homes in that financial crisis. And maybe there was something systemically wrong, but talk about the sort of like, the institutions, I guess, that feed into that notion of individual failing that exists today.
Yeah. So, institutions, I mean, everything from corporate mindfulness, which is a huge, business, honestly. And I'm thinking of not just classes where you're told to breathe, and major corporations, that they have workshops, most of them are kind of harmless. The only harm really is they put the pressure back on the individual worker. Why are you so stressed? Well, actually, if you're doing breathing exercises at the workplace, that's the cause of your stress, you're probably not, it's not going to really work for you. So that's one of the problems with corporate mindfulness. But also Amazon created this, to that point, created this thing called Amazon. I don't know have you heard of Amazon?
No.
It was like this coffin or porta potty like box that workers were told to go into, that was and they, again, was like this meditative thing. I think there were videos or something, and they were like to stand in this box. And, of course, we know that it's really hard to unionize with Amazon, and the hours you can be surveilled, and there's, a lot of low pay. It's not an easy job for people to have, and Amazon is not going to be the answer. So that's like one of the kind of tentacles of this self-blame economy is coming from things like corporate mindfulness. And then, I mean, I think, there's lots of other ways that people put the pressure back on the individual. I mean, we don't have adequate daycare. And then somehow, especially this came very clear during the pandemic, and I spoke to a number of people who had their older kids minding their younger kids during remote schooling, a 14-year-old or 11-year-old minding a 6-year-old and a 7-year-old while their mother's working 2 different jobs. And I mean, especially women who are often in this position as the primary caregiver of their children, it's like, well, what have I done wrong? Why can't I figure out this balance? And it is kind of rigged against the parent, because we spend some of the lowest money in the OECD on daycare. It's a non-daycare system. But I think many of us feel like there's something wrong with us, that we haven't figured that out. That's just one of the many ways that it kind of like, it's toxic, it's septic. You're just living in America and you don't really see it. And then suddenly you're like, oh, I can't afford my kid's sick and I can't afford to take the day off, or whatnot. And that's just one of the many ways that we start this crescendo of self-blame that is because we've been asked to take care of everything about ourselves and our families on our own.
So much of what you said reminded me of something, and then I realized that it sounds like Bright-Sided, which I know that you've done work and worked for a long time with Barbara Ehrenreich. So rest in peace to her. But I mean, it's incredible work there too, because it connects the self-help industry, which is essentially it's supposed to be something that unifies people, right, by making them happier, but it's as atomizing as it gets, and it's a part of a culture that eschews collective action, and it's more about it's bootstraps but with like a smiley face on it.
Yeah, and it's kind of like the liberals may fall for it more. And that was part of why I wanted to include things like mindfulness or therapy, psychotherapy, which is actually in truth really hard for a lot of people to access, middle class people as well, but people on Medicaid. I have one writer at EHRP who's been ghosted by her Medicaid therapist and had like severe mental illness during the pandemic. And so that is another way that's put back on the individual, and that is very Barbara, right? But that's something that liberals can fall for more than I did it myself. I'm a survivor. I save money. I'm not going to fall for that welfare stuff. But I think so. That's to me is slightly like that's the more red state version. The more blue state version is this kind of thing, like let's have mindfulness. Let's have therapy. And then if you kind of look under the hood of both of those kind of practices, so both of those healing practices, you can see that there's a lot of pressure put back on the individual, economic, blaming, et cetera, that is not accounted for, and that we or I fall for, right? Like, let's go into therapy, right? And then like you go into therapy and then you realize, oh, I can't actually pay for this, and I don't have the resources to have my kid have her, anxiety treated or whatever. So that to me is one of the ways that pressure is put back on us.